Now, this is all according to a Freedom of Information request. Other payments included £5,000 to a visitor who walked into revolving doors and £10,000 to one visitor who was struck by the car park barrier as they walked under it. A spokesman for Aintree University Hospital said it represents just a tiny part of their budget, these payouts, 0.4% in fact, and some of the money is reclaimed from the NHS insurance scheme. But are these claims negligence or are they mere accidents? I spoke to Brian Dawson, who's from the Association of Personal Injury Lawyers, who represents the industry.
Well, I think they're being awarded £16,000 because the award doesn't depend upon the severity of the negligence, it depends on the severity of the injury. So this person, if they've been awarded £16,000, it means that they've injured themselves rather badly, probably so they couldn't work. And you'll appreciate if somebody's had an accident and can't work, then they still have to pay the mortgage and they still have to support their families, and therefore they need the money to do it. As to how the accident occurred, I suspect it's very simplistic to say they just slipped on a packet of mayonnaise, particularly if it was one that they dropped themselves. I suspect it wasn't quite as simple as that. I suspect that you may find the reality is that in an overpressed or perhaps underfunded organisation, they're not taking proper care about cleaning things up.
Okay. Well, isn't the reality that that organisations pay out? You know, the hospital pays out because it's cheaper to do that than pay the lawyers to fight the claims. I mean, and that means that more people bring claims because they know it'll be settled out of court.
No, I don't think you can say. I don't think you can make that sweeping statement with respect. I mean, I do this for a living, and I know very well that organisations like the NHS will look very carefully at a claim, and if they resist it, it's because they don't think they've been negligent, or they don't think the negligence caused the injury, or if they pay it, it's because they accept they do. I mean, I was looking at this article itself, where the hospital very fairly says we defend civil claims if appropriate. We will also settle if appropriate, and particularly if you're talking about figures like £16,000, then there's no realistic argument that you're paying out as a matter of economics for that.
Well, I don't know, how much are these lawyers paid per day?
Lawyers paid per day. The lawyers are paid by the hour, but don't forget we're now in a situation where lawyers get fixed costs, which if they're settled under a thing called the portal, means they get £900 a claim. Yeah. So it very much depends on how much the lawyer has to do, and the argument I've always said about this is, look, if there is a claim and the defendant paid up straight away, admitted it straight away and paid up, then lawyers' fees would be very, very, very low. The problem with the fees is that there is a tendency for some claimants to continue to resist a perfectly genuine and very good claim, and sometimes for years, and then complain when they have to pay not only the claim but also the lawyer's fees for fighting it. The answer is to pay out more quickly, or if there is generally no claim, then resist it. And the law is such that negligence is quite a hard thing to prove, and if there's a good reason for defending it and they defended it, then they should win.
A lot of these cases are no win, no fee, aren't they?
Yeah, but no win, no fee is simply a mechanism that's been forced on lawyers as a way to bring in claims.
Yeah, but what it means is that people who think that they've got a solicitor on side to whom they owe nothing, if they lose, they think, well, they might as well go for it. I have nothing to lose. If we lose the case, we don't pay a penny. So let's go for it, see what we can get.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're a little bit out of date with that, with respect. Anyway, I don't accept that there's no meat as far as the claimant is concerned, and I don't agree that there are a large proportion of unscrupulous solicitors who push these claims. Most normal solicitors, there may be a lunatic fringe, but most normal solicitors, I think, are sort of more policemen or guardians who weed out a lot of poor claims. It's other people who you may be referring to who advertise for these claims. They're not always solicitors. Quite often they're insurance companies, or quite often they're case management companies, but they're not solicitors. And so I think it's wrong to label greedy solicitors.
But wouldn't it be better to go the other way and make all the claimants appear in court at their expense, so all the expense is incumbent upon the claimant, and if they're successful, all well and good, but if not, then they pay?
Right, don't forget what you're dealing with here. You're dealing with members of the public, and dare I say it, and heaven forbid, yourself, a member of your family, or member of mine. And I say that because I find people often take this compensation culture approach until something happens to a member of their family. And then you find a member of your family has had a nasty accident as a result of somebody's negligence. And read, for example, a drunk driver knocking them over, or some other accident where somebody's done something negligent, not just an accident or a mistake, but something negligent. And then that person, that member of your family, may be a retired person without very much money. Why should they, on top of having suffered an accident which was no fault of their own, they're just minding their own business, carrying on their normal daily life, and somebody's negligence puts them gives them often a very nasty injury, why should they then have to risk mortgaging their house or whatever to get access to justice when the person they're suing is represented by an insurance company?
Because
with very little
I'll answer that. Because there are so many false claims out there, or people looking to make a quick buck, that if you did have a genuine claim, I mean, you mentioned being hit by a drunk driver. I mean, that's a serious offence. What about the person listed in these cases who was struck by a car park barrier as they walked under it? So presumably they know a car park barrier goes up and therefore must come down, and the hospital were negligent in that claim. I mean, how is that possibly negligence?
Well, if somebody walked into a barrier that they should have seen, then by definition, no hospital wouldn't be negligent, which is why I said to begin with.
But that was paid out £10,000.
Well, but I can't comment on the individual claim. To say that if it was established that the hospital was negligent, and the hospital has confirmed they only pay out in cases where they said that themselves, then there must be a lot more to that than you're suggesting. It can't just be a question of the claimant walking into something that he or she should have seen.
So you don't believe hospitals just pay out to make a quick payment to not have a legal process?
Well, I certainly don't believe they do, and if they did, they certainly shouldn't, because that would be sending out the wrong message and would be an irresponsible use of funds. But I'm not accusing them of that, and I don't suggest they do, because in this article they say we defend civil claims if appropriate and settle if it's appropriate. And talking about the funds they use, they say the payments during this period represented 0.4% of our budget.
Yeah, I mean, that's the official language.
It seems to me that they are taking a responsible view where they're only paying out on claims where negligence has occurred.
But let's just go back to one of the raw facts of this case. £16,000 for slipping on a mayonnaise sachet. I mean, is that negligence, or is that just a mistake that happened? Or, someone dropped it, and it was just one of those things that happens in life. Someone then slipped on it. It's just a mistake. It's not negligence, is it?
Right. If it was a case that someone just dropped it and it was just one of those things, there would have been no payment, because it's recognised that people do that. But what happens is that you, as the person responsible, if it's your public, a body with your premises open to the public, you have to have some system of inspection to try and keep things clear and free of hazard. And what's happened here is manifestly, and I know that only because of the result, there has been negligence in that the health service in this case, sadly, haven't taken appropriate care. And in fact, it's not just that they've slipped a bit. It's so bad they've been negligent. And it doesn't matter what they slipped on. They slipped on something, and they've been awarded £16,000, not because they slipped, as you said, on the mayonnaise, but because of the extent of the injury that occurred.
Right.
Now, again, talking about your old mum, if she's perhaps, let's give an example. Your mum's in hospital, and she's just had some operation. She's tottering about the hospital because she's just had a procedure, and she falls or slips on something because of somebody else's negligence. Not just if it was just somebody had dropped it a minute ago, it wouldn't have happened. She's slipped on something because of somebody's negligence. She's broken her hip, and let's say, I know you're probably much younger than this, but say she's 70 or 80, that can be very, very serious. So she falls and breaks her hip, and causing agony. They may not be able to operate on her because of other conditions, and so that's going to devastate her life. And the inference of what you're saying is, well, it's crazy that she should be able to claim compensation. That is just compensation culture. Well, it isn't. I suspect in that situation, most people would agree with me.
Yeah.
But that's reasonable. And you'll probably say, oh, but that's a reasonable claim. What about all the others? Well, what I'm saying is, analysed, all these should be found to be reasonable claims. Otherwise, the NHS wouldn't have paid out on them. If they were crazy claims, then they should be defended. And I'm not about to defend crazy claims.
Yeah, but it's a good example. Yeah, it's a good example, Brian. And when you draw the analogy with a family member, it's interesting how one shifts one's perspective on it. So, Brian Dawson, thank you for your time today in the programme.
Pleasure.
Your station, your voice. BBC